At Zeru, we are making the process of DeFi looping very, very simple and hyper optimizing it and making it super effective. So, the money that you take out from the lending pools, on top of that, we enable leverage, on chain leverage, and this leveraged capital is then deployed into, for example, market making on Uniswap. Right?
BM, and welcome to this week's episode of BlockHunters Voices. My name is Joachim Vuju and I'm your host for today. BlockHunters Voices is a platform where we explore the journeys, stories, and insights of blockchain innovators and leaders, as well as the technologies driving their projects. Today, we continue our mission to explore and document the Berachain ecosystem as well as the Harijan ecosystem with Professor Sahoo, CEO of Zeru. Zeru is not just another DeFi venture, it's reimagining how credit and lending work in a decentralized world. But more on that later. Welcome, my friend. It's great to see you.
Great to see you again, Joachim. Amazing work so far, and I've been a fan of your podcast. And what you're doing for the Beta ecosystem is just amazing.
Thank you very much. Let's get on. Professor, you've had an extensive and diverse career from your early days at Johnson & Johnson and HP to leading growth at blockchain projects like Router Protocol, Reef, and Polytrade. Can you walk us through the key moments in your career that shaped your transition from traditional industry to the blockchain and Web3 space?
Well, I have had a pretty long Web2 career, I would say. Started off with Hewlett Packard, as you rightly said, and then Johnson and Johnson and several other brands. Key moments, I think, it takes time for you to understand one specific industry or Web2 overall, right? But one of the important things which I always felt as someone who was just starting out after the university was decision making, right? So sometimes, as an engineer, a few things would seem very, very intuitive, very logical for you, but to get it approved from your bosses and management, it would be a lot of bureaucracy and red tapeism, right? So the delay in decision making and the speed and efficiency that would get throttled is something which always suffocated me, because I have always been someone who believes in speed and action, right? And iteratively we can always make corrections. So but then you realize that every business has its nuances, every business has its challenges, so you will need to respect the processes and protocols that they have. So one of the things which I found particularly fascinating in Web3 is the way individuals could work with each other in a trustless manner, the way you could have decentralized autonomy and decentralization of decision making. So that is something that I found really amusing about Web3, crypto, blockchain, as a space, and that is something that really motivated me. And over 15 years I have held roles in strategy, in engineering, in marketing, business development, growth, and something which I have not been a fan of personally is hierarchy, right? So there was a time when I realized that people had to actually come through 6 levels of getting to have a meeting with me, and that is not something that I vibed with, because I thought it has to be open door policies, it has to be freedom of expression, and trustless and decentralized decision making, and that is what leads to efficiency, and that is what I believe moves the human race forward, right? So
Yeah,
that is
but that's
something.
kind of utopic, right?
Yeah, so that is something which I always found fascinating about Web3, and I thought that it's worth a long gig here. So that's how the transition happened.
Could you share one of the key lessons or memorable takeaway from each of the Web3 project that you worked prior to founding Zero?
Yeah, sure. So I moved to Web3 after the world was hit by the COVID pandemic. So that was the time when I was teaching in SPGen as a professor in strategy. So my first gig in Web3, obviously I entered the Web3 space thanks to Polygon. So Sandeep and I went to the same university, and that is how I learned about Polygon. Yeah. So an early retail investor in Polygon and some of the other projects, and that is how my familiarity in the space grew. So one of the projects that was building on Polygon was Polytrade. So it is an RWA project which in Q1 this year actually did quite well, right? So they were doing invoice discounting, or bill discounting using crypto lending pools. So that was the first project that I was involved with. I was a part of the core founding team, chief of growth. What I realized there was the infrastructure was not ready for real world applications such as trade finance, which we were trying to solve through crypto lending pools. Now there were two factors to this: the merchants who were involved on the consumption side, they had a huge barrier to use cryptocurrencies, right? The familiarity with wallets was not there, and user interface was not easy. User experience was pretty convoluted. So that is when I realized that the space is not yet ready for mass adoption and for transitioning into solving real world problems. So that was a big realization at Polytrade. And then after that I spent about 3 years in infrastructure. So I was a part of Reef, which was a substrate based layer 1 chief of growth again, growing the ecosystem. But there my realization, I mean, I used to be a fan of Polkadot, right? Substrate was, at least on paper, it was quite robust back in the days. But in reality it was not playing out the way it was supposed to play out, because Parachain, having one Parachain to solve one industry specific problem, it's all good. It's like the hub and spoke model of Procter and Gamble, isn't it? But in theory, as robust as it was, in practice it was not working. And then I realized that Reef was a substrate solo chain, by the way. So bridging was also a challenge, and for a substrate solo chain to exist without a bridge, it was fairly challenging. And multi-chain was supposed to build the bridge between Reef to other ecosystems, but we all know what happened with multi-chain. So then so that is when I thought that, okay, it's time to move on from the substrate ecosystem, and started working on something more holistic, which is interoperability. Because interoperability as a use case seemed more relevant and applicable to all ecosystems, and it's almost an ecosystem agnostic infrastructure play, I would say. So router, at the point when I joined initially, was a proof of authority bridge, but then it pivoted to a layer 1 blockchain based on Cosmos again, built
Yeah,
using
yeah.
Cosmos SDK.
Well
Very
validators or router.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So pretty similar to Berachain, isn't it? So that was a superb learning experience, because we had, I think, arguably the best infrastructure for interoperability. Axelar and Router, I still rate as one of the good interoperability solutions based on intents. So my learning for from there was, obviously, eventually the infrastructure is going to be ready, because there are so many people solving for infrastructure. So we had started seeing decentralized sequencers. We had seen Ethereum scaling being solved in various different ways by so many different L2s. I think we have more than 50 L2s today. So at some point in time in Router, I realized that, okay, it is back to building an application. So the key learning for me at Router was, we have done enough work on infrastructure, as an industry, as a space. And of course it's never ending, it's always going to be iterative. It is going to be continuous improvement, and that is what is going to move the world forward. So that is when said that okay, it is time to start building an application again for the consumers to bring the retail into make a significant change to the space that we are operating in. And DeFi was obviously very close to my heart because I have been in DeFi space for almost 7-8 years now. So that is how Zeru happened. So, in a nutshell, I would say the key learning at Polytrade was the world was not ready yet for applications. The infrastructure still needed some work. And then the key learning at Reef was if you are an L1 which is isolated and which actually struggles to it can be however robust on paper, but in practice if it struggles, then it is not going to work in the long run. And at router again, the realization was that infrastructure is finally ready and applications should start taking shape. So these have been my learnings at all of these places.
And basically, after that, you started working at Zero.
Yes, yes.
For those unfamiliar with what Zero is, how would you describe it in simple terms? And what unique value does it bring to the DeFi space?
So, in very simple terms, there are multiple perspectives that I can give, but first I will start with the consumer perspective or the user perspective, right? What is the typical user journey today in DeFi? They would borrow a volatile asset. They would probably lock in a stable asset as collateral. Now, why would they do that? Because the yield on the volatile asset might be quite attractive, and as long as a user is able to make more yields than the interest that he is paying on his loan, then he makes money through arbitrage. Now, this is in a very simple terminology what DeFi looping means. At Zeru, we are making the process of DeFi looping very, very simple and hyper optimizing it and making it super effective. So, this DeFi looping is actually being converted into what we call the Carnot cycle. Now, Carnot cycle obviously the inspiration comes from thermodynamics, but we use it to refer to an economic cycle that can work without external infusion of capital. Now, in this case, over a period of time, as you build your reputation and as you use the protocol more, the dependence of your loan to be backed by a collateral asset is progressively diminished. So you start earning credit tokens, which are soul bound tokens. Now, over a period of time, obviously, you can take out your initial collateral and you will still have credit tokens against which you can take zero collateral loans and then perform DeFi looping. So, this in a nutshell is what Zeru is about. So, you have native lending pools, you have on-chain leverage, and you have integrated DeFi strategies. So the money that you take out from the lending pools, on top of that, we enable leverage, on-chain leverage, and this leveraged capital is then deployed into, for example, market making on Uniswap, right? So you can provide liquidity on Uniswap or Kodiak, or you can deploy it on LSTs or LRTs depending on what your ambitions or yield strategy is. And most importantly, we are making it available on one single UI. The user experience is very, very simple, and you don't really have to spend a lot of time understanding concentrated liquidity, deciding what range to provide liquidity in. So those tricky things are actually quite simplified in case of Zero. Now that is the user perspective. Now, at an economic level, the problem that is facing DeFi today is over collateralization of loans and underutilization of capital. Right, only 30 to 40% of on-chain capital is actually utilized. The rest of it is idle. Right.
Oh, really?
So yeah. I mean, if you look at Aave, Spark, any of the incumbent lending borrowing protocols, the utilization rate is very low. Now that obviously means that the yield for the lenders are lower, right? Now, how do we solve it? And we solve it through on-chain leverage. But you cannot just give away on-chain leverage without having a credit infrastructure in place. What if the user defaults, right? So that is where at the technology level we have an underlying credit infrastructure which we have built, and we have an insurance pool which is self regenerating and which is generated by the users of the protocol. These things make sure that the probability of default is minimized, and there is an underlying credit infrastructure which is governing the on-chain leverage that we provide on loans. Now, the on-chain leverage is obviously making sure that the capital is utilization is much higher, so the lenders get a lot more returns on their lent assets. The borrowers get lot more capital at play, lot more assets at play than they would if they were, typically borrowing from, say, an Aave or Spark. And at the end of the day, where does this capital go? This doesn't go outside the protocol. It gets deployed into Uniswap. So basically, we are increasing volumes into Uniswap. We are increasing volumes into Kodiak. We are increasing volumes into LSTs and LRTs or any of the yield maximizing strategy. So it is a win-win for everyone. The person who is lending assets, they get more returns. A person who is borrowing assets, they don't have to suffer from over collateralization. They have more capital than they put in to play the markets. And overall, for the markets, there is greater churn happening. There is more circulation of capital. The economic flywheel has been triggered, so there is an increased economic activity. And in all of this picture, so there is an increased on-chain activity, there is an increased economic activity, which means it is also win-win for validators, because that determines directly how much economic activity is happening and what is the token utilization rate, and therefore how much incentives can go to the network actors as well. So it is an economic flywheel which has everyone's interests in mind, and this is the reason why Zeru is completely unique. Nobody is actually solving for this economic flywheel, and it has been possible for us because the credit infrastructure which is governing all of this is pretty robust, and we have actually built our own eigen AVS, and we are using layer 0 to make the credit score omni-chain. So it is a robust infrastructure which is governing this DeFi looping, which we call the Carnot cycle, which is making all of this possible.
What was the tipping point or realization that made you decide Zero needed to exist in today's landscape?
Sorry?
What was the tipping point or realization that made you decide Zero needed to exist in today's landscape?
Oh, yeah. So the tipping point was, look, I think our journey started in November 2022. Okay. At that point in time, we realized that for DeFi to move forward, we needed a credit infrastructure to be in place, right? And if we look at the real world, what has good credit infrastructure given us? What has collateral free or under collateral lending enabled? It has enabled credit cards, it has enabled educational loans, it has enabled personal loans. But on chain, those things were not possible yet because there was no credit infrastructure. So that was the tipping point. We said that we needed to come up with a decentralized, fully on chain way of coming up with credit infrastructure. Now, from my learnings, we realized that if you're just building infrastructure, it is good, but how does it benefit the user? And that is when we started building these applications on top of this credit infrastructure. Now, what are those applications? It is building a native lending and borrowing pool which is governed by this credit infrastructure. It is the ability to provide on-chain leverage on top of this credit infrastructure. It is the ability to deploy these funds into yield maximizing strategies on top of this credit infrastructure, and most importantly, using this credit infrastructure to also facilitate leverage. So we said that, okay, if you have a greater credit score, then you will be eligible for greater leverage. Similarly, we also started locking in the fees and the profits made from strategies into an insurance fund. So this insurance fund is the is a first of its kind. This is self-regenerating, and this is generated from user activity. So whatever amount is locked in the insurance fund is backing the zero collateral loans that are given out by the system. So yeah, that was the tipping point. We started off by creating a credit infrastructure which was fully on-chain, decentralized, and omni-chain, and then we started building applications on top of that credit infrastructure.
And you basically started in the Berachain ecosystem, I don't know, like from 2-3 months ago or something like
Yes.
that. Okay, that's
So
nice.
basically, we modeled the protocol on Ethereum, to be fair,
On
because
Ethereum, yes.
Ethereum is still where DeFi lives, in terms of volumes, in terms of economic activity, right? So the foundational layer was Aave, for example. And the first strategy that we considered integrating was Uniswap V3, concentrated liquidity market making. In fact, our strategies are modeled on some of the most advanced research papers on Uniswap. So we have codified it, and we have developed AI ML, and we have started training the models so that they can be super effective. So yeah, it was modeled on Ethereum,
On
and we'll
Ethereum,
probably have a version, a beta mainnet live on Ethereum very soon. But when we learned about Berachain, the kind of economic layer gamification that they were introducing,
the
and
proof of liquidity.
yeah, proof of liquidity, that was, I think, very very inspirational. Firstly, because our team has been involved in building a layer 1 blockchain, which is Cosmos based. We understood the technology quite well. So we knew that what is the technology that is behind Berachain. So we understood that quite well. But the economic layer gamification which they had added, proof of liquidity, and making sure that all the network actors are working cohesively and meaningfully with each other: users, validators, the foundation, the app developers, everyone is working towards a commonized goal. And everyone's interests are kind of closely knit together and closely aligned. And that is what motivated us to build on Berachain more than anything else, because these are the kind of innovations and novelties which will push the space forward.
Yeah, but actually, we're gonna be using Zero on both Ethereum and Berachain as well, right?
Yeah.
And are you considering launching NFTs with future parks for the Berachain mainnet when it go live, similar to other projects in the ecosystem?
Yeah, so we will be launching our NFT collection, and it will probably go live in November. But our NFTs, they will be very closely associated with protocol utility. So more on this later. But what we are thinking is basically the holders of these NFTs will have in-app privileges when they are using Zeru. So of course there is one collective value or collectible value, or the art side of things, which makes NFTs speculative and interesting. But because we are a DeFi protocol, we also want to add some meaning of using NFTs as gate passes or loyalty cards or privilege passes into the protocol.
And basically, those are your first supporters that buy the NFTs, right?
Yeah, power users or supporters, so that we can probably give them better incentives, better trading fees, or trading happy hours. Again, we are working as we speak to determine what kind of privileges we can provide to these NFT holders. But yeah, it will be out very shortly.
What are some of the biggest challenges you foresee in scaling Zero, and how do you plan to overcome them, especially in terms of user adoptions and risk management?
Challenges in Zeru, and how do
Yes.
intend
How
to
do you
overcome.
foresee scaling them?
Yeah. Okay, so first challenge is the technical challenge. Okay. Because Zero is almost 16,000 lines of code. Okay.
Oh.
Now to put things in perspective.
That's only on testnet.
Yeah. But again, the product on testnet will be very close to the product that we will have on mainnet, so it's not going to change drastically. Now, almost 40% of this code, I would say, is the credit infrastructure and the insurance fund. Right now, on top of this, we obviously have added DeFi strategies. So the first challenge is, if we are able to make liquidity provisioning on Uniswap available on Zeru, it means that we have to understand Uniswap's logic really, really well. And that is why we have to be constantly up to date with the research papers that are being published, and how to codify that effectively. To it is as such challenging to build your own app or protocol, but when it comes to understanding what someone else is building, that is even more
Exactly.
challenging. So that
And
is
how you can integrate both
exactly,
pieces, right?
exactly. Because with Zeru, we are creating a DeFi marketplace, which can be a one-stop solution for a DeFi region. Right? He doesn't have to go to 10 different places. He has lending and borrowing. He has on-chain leverage. He has yield strategies. Everything is happening seamlessly on a single platform. And as a byproduct, he is getting zero collateral loans. As a byproduct, he is getting on-chain reputation, credit score. So pretty much, it's a complete DeFi DeFi economy, which is Zero. So that is the first and the biggest challenge which we have faced as a team so far. And because we have been bootstrapped, it's obviously not possible to onboard a team of 15-20 engineers. So we are always limited by resources. So that has been the first challenge. The second challenge that I foresee is in terms of liquidity pools, right? In our lending pools. So now the obvious question that would come is, who is funding these leverages, right? So if a person puts in $10,000 as collateral, and if we are giving him a starting leverage of 3x, so essentially for every $10,000 there has to be $20,000 which is available in the lending pool. So for the protocol to get kickstarted, there is some initial liquidity that the protocol needs to be able to support the leverage. Now eventually, once the flywheel has been triggered, the more the demand for from the borrower side, the more the demand for leverage, the rates for lenders will become even more lucrative, and people will start depositing into Zero's lending pool. But before
We are
that,
just gonna prepare for DeFi summer 2025, right?
yes, exactly. Absolutely. 2025, 2026, and I'm sure this DeFi summer is going to last a very long time, because Aave has been doing really well, and innovations are happening. If you have been following Stanley, he has been super bullish on DeFi Renaissance. So we are all very hopeful that all of this will happen. But for all this to get triggered, we will need that initial liquidity. And how are we aiming to solve that? So RFB from Berachain comes to the rescue. So thanks to the Bera Foundation, Berachain team, they have created these native growth hacks and native bootstrapping mechanism for protocols like us, who are like truly bootstrapped and need that initial push. So we have already filed for the RFP, probably one of the few hundreds of protocols which have done that. And we hope that the application goes through. So that would really help us in bootstrapping liquidity. So that is on the Berachain side of things. With Ethereum, it might be a more conventional approach, where we might approach some of the liquidity providers, to bootstrap some liquidity. But on Ethereum, it's going to be a beta mainnet. So obviously, we are going to have limits on the volumes, and this is the first time a protocol of this nature, an application of this nature, is going to get launched. So it is very important to take it slow, release it to limited people, limited volumes, understand and analyze the data, and train your AI ML models before really opening it out to a larger base with larger volumes. So that is how we are intending to solve this challenge. Apart from that, growth and adoption is challenging for any protocol. I think it is about finding the proposition, and thankfully we have very, very specific value proposition for our consumer segments. So we have a very sharp value proposition for someone who is a pure lender, right? Someone might just want to lend their money to the lending pool and earn yields out of it. So for him, the value proposition is the yields that Zeru is going to give you will be at least 60 to 65% more than what you're getting on Aave. Now, why is that? Because our capital utilization is going to be better, and we will also be sharing a percentage of profit from the yields with the lenders. So that is going to be a very attractive proposition for liquidity providers who are providing liquidity to our lending pools. For the borrower, the value proposition is very simple. Any lending and borrowing protocol today is over collateralized, so you will always be able to borrow less than what you have put in as collateral. But with Zeru, you will get more than what you have put in as collateral to play the yields market, to play the DeFi markets, right? So that's a very, very clear and sharp value proposition for borrowers. Now, for people, for DeFi degens, who do looping, right? The value proposition is simplicity, because on the same user interface you are getting everything that DeFi looping has to offer. And secondly, you are making it very, very effective. You're able to generate much more yield on Uniswap than a user would be able to do if they were to deploy the capital themselves and provide that liquidity on Uniswap themselves. Now, there is a very simple logic to this. If you have $10,000 to deploy on Uniswap or Kodiak, if you are getting X percentage yields, okay, by providing liquidity. Now on Zeru, I am providing 3x leverage, right? So which means the yields will be at least 3x of what you would get if you were to deploy $10,000, because with Zeru you are deploying $30,000. So that is the value proposition for someone who wants to provide liquidity on Kodiak Islands or Uniswap in case of Ethereum. So we have identified these micro segments of consumers, and we have a very, very specific value proposition mapped to each of these. And yeah, we hope it will trigger off. And as users use the protocol, and this is something which is very relevant for emerging markets, because the more you use the protocol, the more your credit score will be, and you will get more credit tokens, which means the amount of zero collateral loans that you are eligible for is going to grow over a period of time. And the second thing that will grow is the amount of leverage that you can take on loans. So, for example, if you have shown good behavior on chain for 18 to 24 months, you will be eligible for a 15x leverage. And if you are, if you are eligible for $10,000 worth of zero collateral loans in 18 months, now which is not very difficult to achieve. So 10,000 into 15, that is $150,000 worth of capital available to be deployed on Kodiak or Uniswap or any of the LSTs, LRTs that we have integrated. Now, that is a very, very attractive proposition for emerging markets, because we are allowing them to enter a game which is traditionally being played by institutions or whales. So we are in a way democratizing a few things in DeFi, and we obviously hope to expand the reach and grow the industry by this.
You just basically explained to me how will the DeFi future is gonna look in the, I don't know, next 1 year or two or something.
Yeah.
Maybe in even closer 6 months in the future. I mean, when the liquidity is gonna come back. Yes, it was a blast. Thank you, Ashu. It's really been an honor to talk with you. I'm really excited to see how everything is gonna come together with Zero. And have a great one and talk soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and look forward